r/AskReddit by Reddit and chill. What's an unusually strange historical event that few people know of? In the 1980s, Domino's Pizza introduced a mascot named the Noid. Its main goal: stealing pizzas and making your pizza delivery late. The slogan: avoid the Noid. Unfortunately, there was a man with paranoid schizophrenia named Kenneth Noid who thought this whole campaign was created to mock and persecute him due to the mascot's name. So one day, Noid entered an Atlanta Domino's location and took 2 employees hostage. During the 5-hour standoff, he got hungry, so he ordered the employees to make him some pizzas. Of course, he didn't pay for any of them, thus inadvertently living up to the Noid's tendency to steal pizzas. He was eventually apprehended and spent some time in a mental institution until his death in 1995. Meanwhile, Domino's retired the mascot due to what had happened and it was never mentioned again. Could I go to a Domino's and just say "Remember the Noid"? What would happen? I've heard the story, but had to look it up to retell it. In 1809, Jean Todd Crawford rode on horseback from Greensburg, KY to Danville, KY, 60 miles, at the age of 44. She needed an abdominal tumor removed. The surgery was performed on Christmas Day by Dr. Ephraim McDowell on his kitchen table, without anesthetic. A part of the fallopian tube, along with 22.5 pounds of stuff, the tumor, was removed. After 25 days, she returned home, via horseback, so the story goes, on the same path. It was considered the first successful intentional opening of the abdominal cavity to remove something. She died at 78. I can't imagine having that much will to live. If I had a tumor and the only way to get rid of it was to go 60 miles on horseback and have it removed without anesthesia, there's no ducking way I'd even consider it. I mean, this wasn't an event per se, but it is one of my favorite stories. When the Titanic was sinking, the head chef aboard knew the ship was going down. So he decided to take as much wine as he could and drink it. His logic was it was going to the bottom of the ocean anyway, so why not? Anyway, so he gets pretty tipsy and continues to eat all the food he can find because Lord knows how long they would be out there. The man also filled at least 1 lifeboat with food and drinks, but decided not to get on yet. So the boat is starting to do that iconic tilting into the air and the head chef decides to climb onto the railing and walk across it, since it was basically a walkway at that point. Gets to the propellers just as the boat breaks in half and he rides it down. He gets to the top and spends as much time he can out of the water by riding it down before being submerged into the ocean. He then waited for the lifeboats to come back and was one of the few people who survived while being in the water that night. What? The rest of the ship is being terrorized by disaster, and this one man parades his way through a Big Lebowski-esque dream sequence to safety, complete with refreshments, an intermission, and a slide. On the 16th of September, 1920, there was a terrorist attack on Wall Street. At 12:01, 100 pounds of dynamite exploded in front of the corner at JP Morgan. Within minutes, Wall Street looked like a war zone. Hundreds of pounds of metal fragments, which had been concealed inside the wagon that had hidden the bomb, filled the streets with shrapnel. Burnt bodies littered the sidewalks and smoke filled the air. No one ever claimed responsibility or was arrested. Damage from that attack is still visible to this day. The Taiping Rebellion of 1850 to 1864 was the second most deadly singular conflict in history, at 25 million deaths, only beaten by the Second World War. That's just under 5k deaths per day, every day, for 14 years. That's a lot of dead people, especially for that time. There was only about 1.2 billion people total on Earth. To put that in perspective, that is about 2.1% of the total global population eliminated. With today pop of 7.7 billion. A war that eliminated 2.1% of the total pop would kill over 160 million. Today almost 7,500 people a day die just in the USA. On the 6th of August, 1915, undead Russian infantry successfully defended Osawik fortress against German forces despite being heavily outnumbered. I should explain that undead bit. The German forces consisted of, and a more just quote wiki, Because it's a bit of a list. 14 battalions of infantry, 1 battalion of sappers, 24-30 heavy siege guns, and 30 batteries of artillery equipped with poison gases. Russian forces were less than 1,000, and roughly half were militia, not regular infantry. The Russians were determined to hold the fortress, and did a remarkably good job of it, right up until the Germans flooded the entire structure with chlorine gas. For those of you unaware of what chlorine gas does, basically your eyes, throat, and lungs dissolve in a slurry of blood and disintegrating tissue. Russian gas masks did not protect against chlorine gas, and the fortress had no defenses that would protect the inhabitants. The Germans waited for the gas to dissipate, and strolled right in. The Russians countercharged. A band of men, their skin sloughing away, coughing up pieces of lung, dead on their feet but too stubborn or angry to stop, charged the Germans. The Germans broke at the sight, ran, and were gunned down. The Russian soldiers had no idea what the Germans had just done to them. They ran for their lives. And, as you would expect, they ran into the woods to hide from a barrage of bullets. They were surrounded. There were about 30,000 Russian prisoners inside the fortress. We managed to get them out and made them safe by hiding them under hay. Battle for Stalingrad by G. A. Poyarka. There was a period in the Middle Ages of knights fighting giant snails in paintings. No one knows why. I think it's just very old memes, like painting their enemies as snails to make fun of them and stuff like that. When the Mongols at their height of power conquered China, they were still in their phase of killing all the people and burning their cities, to turn it back to pasture for their horses. Huge swaths of Central Asia had already been treated so, laid to waste. There was one guy, I don't remember what his name was, a northern tribesman who'd fought against the Mongols but been captured and joined them. When they were deciding what to do with China, he convinced the Mongols there was more profit in leaving as it was and levying taxes, with which the Mongols could buy whatever they wanted. Apparently that hadn't occurred to the Mongols before, but that one guy definitely saved millions of lives. Wasn't there also a pope who convinced them to turn around and go somewhere else? But to this day nobody knows what was said. The legend of the Green Children of Woolpit concerns 2 children of unusual skin color who reportedly appeared in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England, sometime in the 12th century, perhaps during the reign of King Stephen. The children, brother and sister, were of generally normal appearance except for the green color of their skin. They spoke in an unknown language, and would only eat raw broad beans. Eventually they learned to eat other food and lost their green pallor. But the boy was sickly and died soon after he and his sister were baptized. The girl adjusted to her new life, but she was considered to be rather loose and wanton in her conduct, too, after she learned to speak English. The girl explained that she and her brother had come from St. Martin's Land, a subterranean world inhabited by green people. One of my favorite stories. She even recalled crawling into a cave with her brother and when they came out on a recognizable planet. In 1794, it rained toads in La Lane, near a French city called Lille. This event was witnessed by soldiers. Yes, I've heard about this. Think there has also rained fish at some points. Worldwide, I think. Most Americans don't know about the 30 Years' War, which was an unbelievably complicated clusterfuck that killed 20% of the German population. I tried to read a book about it and gave up because I could not make heads or tails of what TF was going on. Canada has heist nearly 3,000 tons of maple syrup in 2011-2012. They stole it from a cartel that controls 77% of the global maple syrup supply. They specifically stole from the strategic reserve of syrup that's used to price fix the global market. It was millions in syrup that was taken. Absolutely wild. That time a dentist got pissed at Japan because of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, so he declared war on Japan and suggested making bombs using bats. And the US military actually went through with attempting to make them. They only stopped making their bat bombs because they developed the nuke. I mean, TBH, I think it would have been almost as effective but more humane. The Carrington event. A solar event so strong that if it happened today it'd probably send most of the world back to the Dark Ages. Telegraph systems all over Europe and North America failed, in some cases giving telegraph operators electric shocks. Telegraph pylons threw sparks. Some telegraph operators could continue to send and receive messages despite having disconnected their power supplies. Some telegraph operators could continue to send and receive messages despite having disconnected their power supplies. Holy shit. Robert Lincoln, Abraham's only surviving son, was pushed into the path of an oncoming train and was subsequently saved by Edwin Booth, John Wilkes, Abe's killer brother. It isn't super significant. Just a silly twist of fate. And Robert Lincoln was at or nearby for the assassinations of his father, Garfield and McKinley, leading him to be so superstitious about it so that he vowed never to meet a president again. The Halifax explosion. In 1917 a munitions ship detonated, creating the largest non-nuclear man-made explosion in history. Thousands died. Thousands were injured. And the ship was burning long enough to attract enough attention that the detonation blinded even thousands more. Boston participated heavily in responding to the disaster. To this day, Nova Scotia donates a Christmas tree that is displayed publicly in Boston every year. I think the Halifax explosion is pretty well known. A bit more obscure is the Ipoh explosion which, with a 1-2 ton equivalent, was nothing to sneeze at. Everyone involved died. So it's not totally clear how it happened. There was a span of time where clocks were already a thing but were too luxurious for the average citizen. But most cities had one on their church or something. And since the day starts a little bit different everywhere, every city had their own time zone. It had to be generalized over the globe because of industrial revolution and railroads getting more popular, but it still took a very long time for every village to be convinced that it would be better to adapt. Oliver Cromwell's posthumous execution. Also, a German U-boat in World War II was sunk due to a toilet. NM Wikipedia.org link. The Great Stork Derby. A Toronto financier left a part of his estate to whatever woman in the city could produce the most children in the decade following his death. There was a This American Life on this. English sweating sickness. A high mortality contagion with strange symptoms that mysteriously appeared in 1485 and just as mysteriously disappeared in 1551. Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin have all been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Getting nominated is like filing a lawsuit. Lots of meritless lawsuits get filed. Lots of news articles and editorials pop up and get circulated. How absurd is this lawsuit? Society is out of control. The system is broken. The lawsuit is dismissed by a judge as ridiculous, or dies some other death. Or if it somehow managed to win over one court it gets overturned at another level. But that doesn't make the news. And people feel the system is terribly flawed. Sybil Ludington rode 40 miles to her town to gather 400 troops and warn them that the British were coming to attack. This happened in 1777 and she is often overshadowed by Paul Revere. Sybil was a 14-year-old girl who was on her horse Star when she did this in the middle of the night, waking troops by banging a stick on fence posts and other objects. There is currently a sculpture of her in New York, but Paul Revere is often recognized first. Paul Revere had the networking. The Boston Great Molasses Disaster of 1919, 21 people died and 150 were injured. The Boston Massacre. The Rasputin connection to the source of the all persons fictitious disclaimer on American films and TV shows. TLDR version. MGM made a film that implied Rasputin raped the then still alive at the time Russian princess. Call of Duty. Zombies Group 935 is based on a real Japanese unit which performed biochem experiments on humans during World War II. I thought I knew all about World War II until I stumbled on this gory nugget. Wiki link to Unit 731. A B-52 with a payload of thermonuclear bombs broke apart and crashed near Goldsboro, North Carolina in 1961. One of the bombs nearly detonated. 3 of its 4 arming mechanisms had activated. Isn't one of the bombs still missing? In the late 1800s into the mid 1900s, It was common for there to be so much pollution in the Cuyahoga River in Ohio that it would regularly light on fire. 13 times. In Wikipedia.org link. At least 13 fires have been reported on the Cuyahoga River. The first occurring in 1868, 12, 18, the largest river fire. In 1952. Caused over $1 million in damage, 12, to boats, a bridge, and a riverfront office building. Dead link, 19. Secondary fun fact from history. Kodak found out about nuclear detonations by using corn silk to pack their film, which would be messed up due to the radioactive fallout, and the Gov used their film. So the US Gov began telling Kodak when they were detonating nukes and where, so that they could ensure they did not use radioactive corn silk to pack their film. They never told the US public that they were eating irradiated food. Imagingresource.com link. Ducking like and subscribe.